Hi everyone. It's so good to see you guys. Hi Richard. Hi Samuel. Okay, so I know some of you. For some of the others, you may be new to the Changemaker Institute. My name is Elina Ngboit, and I am the founder and director of the Changemaker Institute. And our mission is really to pave the path for businesses to be a force for good. And a little bit about the events that we have been holding over the course of the summer. We started the events in June, and this is the very last of our summer roundtable. And so we've been having these roundtables every 2 weeks, starting in I think the second Monday of June, and we have covered quite a lot of things in those six events. So I'll share my slides with you. So today is the last one, building a successful social enterprise. We've talked about issues that concern social entrepreneurs in the session, starting with what social impact means. What does it mean to be financially sustainable, getting real about DEI, raising funds, and then thinking about IP as a revenue generating strategy. And so this roundtable is really to bring everything together. So I usually like to start the event by getting us to set our intention. Most of us are coming from another meeting or maybe rushing into this hour. So I wanted to just get everyone to set their intention. And as a really good friend of mine, Lisa likes to say that in this hour that each of you will find who you're looking for and meet who you are seeking this hour, right? So let's set up intention for this hour. And I wanted to make since this is the last roundtable, I wanted to make this as casual as possible. So, usually I do a couple of slides at the beginning of the event just to contextualize the issue. But today I wanted to make it more of a free flow discussion, talking about how we got to this point, talking about some of our future plans, and also engaging with our community, getting to know you guys better, right? So I talked a little bit about myself. I'm a Stanford Law graduate. I have a PhD in copyright law and history. But today I'm a law professor. I teach in Mississippi College, and my background, from my PhD to now, my focus has been on intellectual property. But also through my work in intellectual property, I have also gotten very involved in thinking about social enterprises and what it means for a social impact business to actually be a force for good in the world. And the whole point about the Changemaker Institute, the original mission, was really to bridge what academics think about, and use some of the methodologies, the language, and bring that to business, right? So that businesses have access to all this material that they can then put to use and then create the impact that they want to create. So that was the original mission of the Changemaker Institute. So the Changemaker Institute was incorporated in March this year as a public benefit corporation. So we have a dedicated public service or a public good component that's ingrained into the profit goal, and so that's who we are. So we work with businesses to help them, identify the impact that they are having in society, and bear in mind sometimes that impact may actually be negative. So we want to kind of align businesses to create impact that are positive, and so that's where we are, right? And so the emphasis in working on social impact really is to address two different issues and to address those two issues really, really well. One is, how do we create impact, right? What does that impact look like? And number two, how do we become profitable, right? Because a lot of companies in the social impact space are not able to bridge, their social mission and profitability, right? It always seems to be two exclusive, mutually exclusive things, right? You either pursue profit at all costs and then you set aside your social mission, or if you're a social impact business, then your profitability kind of takes a back seat. So that's the thinking that we started with at the Changemaker Institute, and through the summer, from talking to you, from talking to the community, from talking to everyone um, that have been coming to these events, that the hypothesis is true, is validated, right? There's either a problem with making the right impact or getting funds to make that impact. And so thinking about impact, there is so much literature and a lot of work that are done, in the impact space. A lot of companies call themselves, I'm an impact-based company, right? And so the question then becomes, well, what does that mean, right? What does impact mean? And so when I started the events in June, right, we talked about Ashoka and systemic change and all that. And don't get me wrong, I love Ashoka. I love everything that Ashoka does. But the impact is not defined as well in Ashoka as well. And, one of the earliest fellows, I think, one of the first few fellows, Ashoka fellows, was Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, right? And Wikipedia, yeah, it's got a huge impact on libraries and our ability to get information, and it's an impactful nonprofit organization, but that impact again is very nebulous, right? We don't have any context to the impact. And so after talking to all of you and going through this summer events, I thought that we need a more concrete idea and a more tangible way of thinking about impacts, right? And I keep coming back to the Sustainable Development Goals. I see Claudia here, and Claudia, is a big proponent of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I don't want to put pressure on you, Claudia, but if you ever want to say something, come on and say about the work that so Claudia and I are on the core group for the US implementation of the SDGs, and we are with Catalyst 2030. So Catalyst 2030 is a separate group that Claudia and I are involved with. And so, Claudia, do you feel like you're up to saying something about that? And don't forget the DEI.
Yes, I will invite everybody here to our DEI group. So it's a pleasure to be joining here again, Alina, in this journey that I think I only missed one, I guess, that was in vacations, but we've been working together since the implementation of the USA chapter of Catalyst. We both belong in a core group, and our goal is to get the SDGs attained by 2030. That's all Catalyst's major mission, and that's what we strive for. And when we were implementing the USA chapter in the early beginnings, we were encouraged to go through ideation sessions that led to two avenues. And one of those avenues was to implement a DEI, so to start working on a diversity, equity, inclusion statement for companies to use under the lenses of our view, social entrepreneurs. No, so that evolved. We presented that on the Catalyzing Change Week during May, and now we are forming a task force group. So if you are a Catalyst member, we are already invited to. We'll be starting our first meeting, I think will be between now and first week of September. It's about to, Alina, we have to get along with that because Susanna has already mailed me. But if you are not on Catalyst, that's a good opportunity. no, for you if you are interested in the DEI theme. But following what this topic is coming from this for this meeting, the social impact. So I run an organization called Social Impact Movement, and actually we are really struggling to provide the social impact, like in KPIs and things, and that's most needed for all small organizations like us. So we do work on the ground, we encourage people, we educate, we leverage this and that, but when it's time for us to show our KPIs to potential funders, investors, it's falling short. So because we don't have that measured and pointed at specifically as the way they are expecting. So there's this dichotomy between we're doing so good on one hand, and on the other hand, we're doing so poorly. So how can organizations like us leverage and rebalance the structure and fine-tune our work with what is expecting from the funding side?
Yeah, exactly. So Claudia, that's such an important point that you made about tangible impact, right? Because we can talk about impact all we want, and unless it becomes tangible, it's really an aspiration, right? And we as social impact businesses, we don't want aspirational impact, right? We want to ground our impact in something tangible, which is why I keep coming back to the Sustainable Development Goals, because even though the measurements are, it is not quite there, but it's still a framework to work with, right? And if you are a social impact business, we want to align our businesses with the SDGs, so that, as Claudia was saying, if you want funding, you can actually say, okay, our business is committed to, for example, number 9, right? SDG number 9, equality, right? Bridging the inequality gap. If you can hone in on one SDG and come up with measurable, as Claudia says, KPI, right? Key performance indicators, or metrics that can show that your outputs are actually creating an outcome for society, then when you are actually trying to think about being profitable, looking for funding, then those metrics can actually make sense to the funder, right? Because if you're actually looking for impact funding, you not only want to show that the product or service that you have will bring market returns, but you also want to prove social returns. Right, so you definitely want to align your business with the SDGs, right? And so to that end, I really want you guys to connect with Claudia. I really encourage you guys to connect with you. I've put her, there's information here that Claudia put up, and then there is her LinkedIn. To get in touch with her. Richard says you should avoid latent metrics, though, because they fail without the systemic change necessary to maintain the momentum, right? So I'm not sure what you mean by latent metrics, but I think I get what you're saying, that you want the metrics to be directed towards systemic change as opposed to just cursory, correct? Yeah. So Richard, if you feel like jumping in, just unmute yourself, right? So don't check the box, right? How could we help support Claudia in her work, her cause? So Jonathan, her LinkedIn, I've put it on chat. Right. So if you scroll up to the first note, that's Claudia's LinkedIn link. Right. You can connect with her there. Right. So get in touch with Claudia in Catalyst. What we're trying to do through Catalyst and implement the SDGs. In the US and hopefully get some headway by the time we get to 2030, right? But the point that I'm trying to make is that if you are a social impact business, you want to align yourself with the SDGs, right? You don't want to be talking about impact without grounding yourself in something, right? So again, that's what we were thinking, right, with the Changemaker Institute. After a while, what does impact mean, right? And it's, again, we don't want to get stuck on the obscurity of what impact means, right? We want to ground that in something real and tangible, right? So that's what we're doing with the SDGs, and we want to ground ourselves there. The second thing that I keep thinking that that social entrepreneurs need to do really, really well, right? So impact is one, but being profitable is another, right? So I want to emphasize again that what we are trying to do here is encourage businesses to be a force for good, right? And I'm talking about businesses. I'm not talking about nonprofit organization, which is, they are needed, right? We need nonprofit organizations. We need educational institutions. We need philanthropic organizations, right? We need government. But each one of these organizations perform a very specific social good that and they don't go into the private sector, right? And the private sector can actually adjust in a way that is more, it's quicker than a lot of this than government organizations and this large philanthropic organizations, right? So one of the interesting feedback that the surveys that we got from surveys is that the sector that actually responded most quickly to the Black Lives movement recently was the private sector, right? Actually, businesses were the ones who responded most quickly compared to government and all the other organizations. And so businesses actually have a really quick are able to address social good in such a way that a lot of these organizations cannot and are unable to. But I also want to emphasize that when you pursue your social mission, you need to make sure that your profits are aligned with that mission, right? You need to be profitable, because in other words, if you are not profitable, then you cannot pursue that mission, right? And so the next thing that we started thinking about at the Changemaker Institute is, well, how do we as social entrepreneurs be profitable while pursuing a social mission, right? And so one of the things to be profitable is to figure out how do you introduce a high price point into your market, but at the same time lowering your cost, right? So in other words, in order to introduce a high price point, you have to have a really superior or a really good product, right, or a service, right? And you need to kind of then figure out what are the costs that you can cut out of that production, right, that process, that will allow you to make the most profits, right? And so the question we need to then figure out is, okay, if we are going to be profitable and we are going to charge a high price point, what kind of product or services can we provide our market, right? And I love coming back to Patagonia. I love Patagonia as a brand, but I love Patagonia's business model as well, right? The product that the gear that they sell are really high quality, right? And their price point is a lot higher than all their competitors, right? And they are also figuring out the best way to make sure that their suppliers, their employees, their people who are providing sewing their garments and providing the merchandise and all that are taken care of, right? So that there is that social impact, there is that high price point. And the question is, well, where can you lower the cost, right? Where are your competitors spending money on that you can eliminate, right? What cost can you eliminate in your production process? And it's so interesting that Patagonia, among all their competitors, spend the least on advertisements, right? Marketing. And the reason why marketing is, they hardly spend a lot of money, or they don't spend a lot of money on marketing, is because they are so strong on their advocacy of the SDGs, right? Or particularly their environmental work, right? So maybe not particularly on, one of the SDGs and or environmental, but that they are the environmental activists when it comes to um, um, making sure that the environment is taken care of, right? So that's the other thing that we came to the conclusion, right? That if you can come up with a superior product and charge a high price point, and reduce cost, that's where your profit margin will increase, right? And the question that we need to ask ourselves is how, right? How do we do that? And so bearing in mind that when you increase the price point with a superior product, not only do you sell the superior product, you're also selling your consumers, a social good that they feel that you can provide, right? So when you buy Patagonia, not only are you buying a superior quality product, right? A product that they would take care of, throughout the life cycle, right? They have all kinds of what do you call it? Programs, right, where you could actually bring it in if it needs repair, and they repair it for you, right? If you want to dispose it, you can bring it back to them and they will recycle it. So at every touch point of your journey with them, you are taken care of, right? But also the the advocacy, right? The advocacy that they're doing for the environment, that offsets their marketing costs, right? So the question that we've been thinking about, that we want to encourage the community to think about, is how do you come up with a superior product, right? That people will pay a high price point for, right? And lower your costs, right? And I cannot emphasize enough that the social good that you're doing to your organization needs to be factored into that price, right? Because if the people that are coming to your organization cares about the environment, right, or if they care about diversity, or if they care about equality, right, if you can provide that social good, right, by committing to the SDGs, then that higher price point is also justified, right? And so that's what we've been thinking about at the Changemaker Institute, right? Two parallels that have to be done really well, right, for businesses to be successful. And so that's what we've been thinking about since we started this journey, in March to this point. And so here we are, right, at the very last round table. And so I wanted to ask you guys what you thought. What are your thoughts, right? What are some of the struggles you may be having as a social impact business? And it probably can fit into one of those two things, right? How do I be profitable, and how do I create the impact?
Ma'am, can I bring up something?
Yeah, of course, Richard. Always good to hear from you.
I actually just attended a conference in Washington last week. These were people who were heavily involved in the defense industry, but in a very specific industry. And one of the conversations that I had might be helpful is to walk that line, as you discussed, between profit and social responsibility. Is a foreign company was dealing with activist investors. Activist investors were telling the company, cut your R&D program to fund your ESG program. And the company is built on their R&D program. Their R&D program is the company.
Right.
And that was the issue that they were running into. And one of the things you can do as an organization that we're involved in, as an example, is be the person who helps on that communication. I was actually able to step in and be the fly on the wall, and allow one person to speak, the other person to speak, because they were talking at each other, not to each other. Right. And that's one of the biggest advantages we can offer in what we do in our industry, in our field, is just allowing the conversation to happen and controlling the flow of the conversation is one of the most valuable tools we can offer, because we're a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah.
It's rather than helping marketing, which is the one concern, that we are literally allowing the company to have an intelligent conversation, and we can direct the conversation to the best outcome, which allows them to be profitable.
Yeah.
And at the same time, control their SDG.
I love that, Richard. Not being able to communicate, right, or communication breakdowns is one of the most problematic. It's one of the biggest hurdles to overcome when we want to, I guess, move away from aspiration to actually real work, right? Because it's easy to talk about aspiration and what should be the aspiration, right? And in academia, the normative value in academics span, years, right? I mean, it's not been resolved since Plato what the normative value should be, right? But we need to move away from that into something concrete, right? What can we do? And realistically, yeah, I love that perspective of allowing conversations to happen. We have here with us, I got to know Dr. Pauline recently, and I would encourage everyone to connect with her as well. She teaches communication, breaking down those walls, as you were saying, right? And letting conversations happen, specifically between genders. So it's really interesting, because sometimes you get gender locked on gender ideology and stereotypes. And Dr. Pauline breaks that down. So I don't know, Dr. Pauline, if you feel like you have an insight to add to that.
Thank you, Alina. Yes, well, everything in our world is about relationships. So everything is about building relationships, and that means that we need to understand differences. So that's where I come into it, is helping people to understand where things are misunderstood, where they break down, how they could be energized to be more synchronistic, more synergy. And there's two steps to it. One is discovering our own perspective as a man or a woman of different types, different cultures, different entities across the world, and then understanding where blocks come and where things break down, and recognizing that we can create a flow of energy in our conversation. So I'll be delighted to connect with anybody on here. And thank you, Alina. This is a wonderful opportunity to make change in the world.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Pauline. Yeah, so Claudia agrees with you. People come from the ideas and they stay for the people. Yeah, absolutely. So Dr. Pauline, I was trying to look for your LinkedIn profile.
I'll find it.
Okay. Yeah, so you put her LinkedIn profile, and I really encourage you to connect with her. Yeah, absolutely. That's an important contribution that we can make towards the like Richard was saying, to walking the line between profitability and impact. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah, Jonathan.
Yeah. So I was working at the Swedish government's innovation agency, Vinnova, and some of my colleagues, some really bright women, they were working at the SDGs implementation then. And there was one big problem, and that was, as Pauline mentioned before, the team really had an understanding of the SDGs, and they were frustrated because the businesses they were talking to, they didn't understand, okay, so why are we doing this? Why is this the focus? Because the companies were so set on the KPIs that they had for 50 years or maybe 80 years sometimes. So they were speaking a completely different language. And I think sometimes one struggle there is that the incentive structures are misaligned.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like the way that you were talking about, when you have structures and systems that have been in place for like 80 years, 50 years, it's hard to change them, right? And so this is what we mean when we talk about systemic changes. Sometimes we need to focus on changing the systems that's causing the deadlock, as opposed to, it may not even be a mindset shift. It may be actually what are the systems that have been in place that's creating this problem. So on the LinkedIn page, I did put up, I think yesterday, the business CEOs roundtable, where there was a commitment to move from shareholder primacy to ESG goals and more social oriented goals. That shift in itself, right, moving away from shareholder wealth maximization, that's a systemic change in itself. You know what I mean? Because even though it's not law that companies should focus on their shareholders and maximize their wealth, but that's how companies have been operating. You know what I mean? So there is no focus on the SDGs or social impact, because that's the thinking, and it's been perpetuated by laws. It's been, cases. It's been perpetuated by norms, right? Expectations. And so, and I think you're exactly right, Jonathan. It's how do we shift, or how do we create those systemic changes? You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. Any other thoughts? Oh, any other challenges that you guys are facing, and see if there's any ideas from the community.
Hey, Alina, this is Gary speaking. I'm not exactly sure, just because I got on a little bit late, right? So I'm not sure exactly what was said and what wasn't. Hello, everyone. Always great to see everyone. I think in this space, exactly, just to kind of piggyback a little bit off of what Jonathan was mentioning, we have to start to have different metrics that we are pursuing and that we are counting. We are recognizing very clearly that our customer base, especially this newer generation, is exactly demanding that. And as entrepreneurs and business owners, and those of us who are in leadership positions within our companies, we have to recognize that and begin to shift that conversation and reflect that within our dynamics of our businesses. And when we do that, that's when we start to really redefine the conversation. So this way, profitability, just like you said, maximizing wealth for shareholders, that's not the most important thing anymore. And as a matter of fact, it may not be the most important thing, depending on exactly what kind of impact your business is kind of create. So I think as we continue to shift in that direction, we really do start to recognize that creativity and growth and equity and fairness and just the way of seeing things evenly and fairly and promoting those marginalized voices, that allows us to grow into this space where we're building successful social enterprise, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're elevating the voices. We want to make sure we're creating equity and fairness, but we also want to make sure that we're profitable, because at the end of the day, we are businesses and we must maintain a profit. So I think, if that hasn't been covered, that's certainly what came to mind for me. And I'll go ahead and quiet down so Richard can speak up.
Richard, were you going to say something?
I figured something that could be of use to people is I spoke at a conference with about 600 participants, and of the things that I heard as feedback were, when I did this same conference 10 years ago, there was zero females attending. This time it was easily 45 to 50% females. But what I was hearing was, I got used to being the only female in the room. That was a real issue that people are seeing, because they hired their female person. They checked the box. That's what I meant by check the box.
Okay.
They checked the box. They have their female in the engineering department.
Yeah.
now they're here. They've done their diversity. They've hit their quota.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that you can, one of the values that we can provide is another way of looking at metrics. Yeah. Metrics are not everything.
Yeah.
If you live by metrics, you're going to, in the end, die by metrics. Because the metrics are only a measure of the changes that you've made. Systemic change is everything. If you don't make the systemic changes in the company, which is what we all do, that's why we're here. If we don't make the systemic changes in the company, the metrics will fail. It's just a matter of is it going to be 2 months or 2 years? But the metrics will fail.
I love that, Richard. You're always so full of insightful comments. Like every time I hear from you, we hear from you, it's like, oh yeah, Richard's right. but you're so right in that the metrics, you cannot have metrics for the sake of having metrics, right? So when we and this is something I should have mentioned earlier when we talked about metrics, is that when we identify those metrics, we need to focus on tying those metrics to the outcome that we want to achieve, right? And that outcome should be qualitative as opposed to quantitative, right? So it shouldn't be, we need to have X amount of, minorities on the board of directors, or it shouldn't be, we need to have X amount of minority students in law schools, right? It shouldn't be a number, but it should focus on the outcomes, right? How many minority students, law students, are then actually going on to holding leadership positions, right? That's a better metrics than saying we need to have X number of minorities on our board or in a law school. I teach in a law school, so I know how law schools think. So Francine, you have your hand up. Welcome. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I'm happy to be here. Hello, everybody. I'm a founder of Serve, which is a financial technology company, and our ultimate goal is to reduce the inequality gap. And we do that through partnering with social impact organizations that want to create purpose trusts to be able to handle their financial transactions and have a more direct impact with the organizations that they serve and the people that they serve. So one of the things, we've been doing a lot of DEI work. My co-founder is a white guy. And he comes from the perspective of he doesn't want many other white guys involved in our company. And, for me, being female and being a founder, and certainly one working in financial technology, I'm usually one of the few at the table. So a couple of things that I've learned about DEI and about having impact is, if you're going to we're talking a lot about metrics, the one key thing that you want to be able to do is have a plan, right? Create your plan strategically to incorporate within your organization, and not one that just hires a certain amount of people, that sort of thing. One that also invests externally into organizations that support DEI from an education perspective. There's a ton of different directions you could go. And also making that DEI plan very public, right? Having it accessible on your website or in your communications, in your email thread. So your organization can, even in your signature, so your organization can have transparency into your DEI plan and not be a Nike or whatever, that says they're going to donate so much to DEI and then, ends up not putting their money where their mouth is, right? So that's one way we can be leaders in that area. Also, we have to look at it and we have to educate other people in organizations that having a DEI plan is also an incredible business opportunity. So hiring people within your organization when you have a DEI plan and you reach out to folks that are diverse and of different colors, of different backgrounds, it's an opportunity because for the majority of their life, if not all of their life, they've been grossly underestimated, right? And they end up being, actually, in my experience, highly overeducated and overexperienced in a lot of situations. So it's a real opportunity for your business to be able to include diverse people for the amount of experience that it can bring to your company. It's not necessarily about checking boxes, because if you're you need to give everybody a chance. Checking boxes is not going to do anything for everybody. But when you're looking at a diverse group of applicants and applying for the same job, you'll be able to see pretty quickly how a lot of times Black and brown folks tend to be overeducated, or women tend to be overeducated for a lot of the roles that they apply for. So it's really an opportunity to give other folks an opportunity, but also your business an opportunity. So those are my tidbits that I've learned that I like to pass along, because they've been really helpful in our planning and for us, not just saying what we're going to do, but actually measuring and doing what we're going to do, and showing how we do that.
So Francine, there is a question from Adriana. What's the name of your organization? Could you please repeat it?
Sure, it's SERVE, just SERVE. Yeah. So we're redoing our website. I will be happy to send it to everybody once we're done. My LinkedIn profile is probably the best place to go.
Could you put it here on the chat?
Yeah, I'll pop it in for you. Happy to connect with anybody at any time.
I want to encourage you to connect with Claudia as well. So Claudia
already did.
yeah. Because I think we can use your input in the DI task force. Yeah.
We'll be happy to join.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So that was great. Anyone else? Does anyone else have any thoughts? Alex, were you going to say something? No pressure. No pressure at all.
Actually, I have a questions.
Okay.
As always, I'm full of questions, but I don't know if this is the right moment to ask them. Anyways, you remember what we talked about last time during video link, and there is a development. I was offered 1.5 million to give up my controlling shares of ATGI. And right now we are in the, as you can see, I'm battling between here and my phone, because we are talking about shareholders and they are partners and shareholders are yelling at my phone right now. So maybe I could use some advices, because I was planning to open up the technology, open source.
Maybe you want to keep the description as general as possible and make your question as general as possible. Since this is an open forum, you want to not be too specific on anything. Or otherwise, I'm happy to talk with you.
Sure.
So is the question, is open source a good path? Is that the question, Alex?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah. So is open source a good solution? So maybe Alex, if it's okay, I can describe the situation generally just to see what people think. So I think the situation with Alex is he's come up with a way to control heat that can be used in a variety of situations. And he wants to make that technology open source, but he's having some difficulty in that his partners are reluctant to go that way. Is that accurate, Alex, for right now?
Yes, that's, yeah, exactly. So not all of them basically, but most of them, you know. And now the confusion is that I got offered to be paid out, which is small amount, but it's still something that, you know, brings confusion to the table. And I'm more inclined to go to open source. I mean, that's my path, but we have a problem between bringing profit to shareholders and doing the right thing.
Jonathan, do you have any thoughts since you asked that question?
Okay, so it's a great question. I can give an example of a company at KTH where I studied. So this was a company that developed a way to use ultrasound, like when you check if you have a baby. They use that to measure the water consumption in buildings. And I mean, for them, of course, if they had developed, if they have focused on open source quite early, they would have the possibility of using that in like all the world, right? But the tricky part for them is that, you know, this was a team of like 3 engineers, and one was working part-time at another place. One hadn't finished his university degree, and the third one was kind of happy to work with this. So they had some money, and they started to get some investors. But in their case, the technology was so early. So they focused on, you know, they didn't even think about or consider going open source because it was so early in the beginning of the company. But in your case, I mean, it sounds more like if you're considering to do an exit, or if you're considering to work with, you know, this team. Maybe, depending on the investors, you could have a model where you have the rights to do things in certain countries, for example. Like, let's say that there's a company in the US, and they might not have a specific interest in this technology used in rural Africa. Whereas you yourself as founder, you might have a large interest in that. And I think, like when it comes to these kind of legal twists, I think Alina probably has like years of experience, whereas I wouldn't be able to advise you. But I would think more about like, is this the people that I want to work with in 15 years? Can I see myself waking up early every morning and working with them? Is this the guys and girls that I want to change the world together with? And if it's not, then, you know, how could I build a foundation that I can work from?
Yeah, that's really great advice, Alex. Like I like the last bit. It's not even legal. It's who you are as an individual, right? Do you see yourself working with them on a long-term basis, or do you see, well, this is not going to work out? You know, and then you want to start from that point and then take it from there. You know what I mean? Like the legalities aside, because you can sit down and hammer out the legalities and sign, you know, a 50-page contract, but if you're tied down to an organization you don't want to work with in the long run, it's not going to be worthwhile. And I think Jonathan's spot on. Like you want to ask that question first. I hope that helps. Thank you, Jonathan. That was great.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so Alex, Adriana has some ideas as well. So Adriana, Alex, if you could connect with Adriana or to know, yep, she's in the chat, and she's on LinkedIn as well. If you can connect with her, maybe you can take that conversation. Just talk to her about it as well. And then I want to just highlight what we're going with the Changemaker Institute in the last 10 minutes. I always want to be respectful of your time. So I just wanted to say that, you know, this was the last roundtable, and it started in June, and it's gone really well. And so moving forward, I didn't plan for anything. I mean, in additional events after this roundtable. It was just a summer, roundtables to get people together. But thinking about the long-term goals for the Changemaker Institute, we do have plans to get B Corp certified within the year. So we are very concerned about the community that we are in, and I'm thinking that I will continue these events on two different angles. So one would be like a networking session where everyone who is doing social impact work can come together and network. That's one aspect. The other aspect is something like this, something that's more educational or more, strategy and strategic thinking. So that's in the pipeline. I'm working on that. I'm thinking that strategy is actually quite important because, we've been talking about systemic changes. We've been talking about how to position your business. I think being able to strategize on those two things, what does impact look like and what does it mean to be profitable, to have regular sessions on just strategy and thinking about those things would be very valuable to the community. But if not, let me know if you have any other thoughts about what we would need as a community, right? Like, how can we serve you in a way that will benefit you, right? So that I'm thinking of that, a networking session, and then a strategy, thinking about strategies, right, on those two fronts, maybe alternate week or every 2 weeks. What do you guys think? Thumbs up, thumbs down? No. That's good. Okay. So let me plan that out. I'm going to plan the strategy and the networking. So that's one. The other thing too, we have committed to pledge 1%. So we are committed to pledging 1% of time, equity, profits, and labor to the community. So we are huge on community building. So Jonathan says maybe a Google Sheet to continue sharing things. Actually, we have started a community, a Changemaker community that I've put in some materials already in the Changemaker, in that community. So I don't have the link right now with me, but I did put up the link on the event page. Right, so it's a free community. You can sign up there. It's hosted by Kajabi, but it's a free community. I didn't want to do like a Facebook group or where Facebook is a little bit noisy, too noisy for me. but we do have a dedicated Changemaker community that I would invite all of you to be a part of, so that I can regularly update the materials and put things that is, as I'm thinking about strategy, I will put things on strategy in the Changemaker group. So please join us. And again, the link is in the event page on LinkedIn. So that's one. The other thing also is that's what we're thinking about going forward. We are working on launching some programs that will keep us. There you go. Jonathan put the link there, right? So thank you. So do join the community. And you can put up anything that's related to what you guys are working on, questions that you have. Right. This was a good conversation, and I want to keep that going. So, for example, Claudia, if you feel like the DEI roundtable is kind of opened up to everyone, and everyone can join, and you want to invite everyone, you can put the link in there, right? So feel free to use the community. It's built for you guys, and then keep on the lookout for the next. How we're going to roll this out in terms of moving forward with community building. and I think it's an important conversation to have to keep the momentum going for you guys, to make sure that you are always thinking about these two things, right? Your impact and your profitability going forward. So I think that's all I have for today. So does anyone have any comments, before we wrap up the summer session and move on to the I guess the regular session, or the what's coming up next?
Yeah, Lena, I'd just like to say thank you for putting all of this together, right? It takes a tremendous amount of work and organizing and just kind of planning to get all of these things going. And then obviously the courage to put these things together and run them, right? So I certainly appreciate that. And I appreciate you for bringing us all together. We've made I know I've made some pretty good connections through over the last few weeks with quite a few individuals, and another few connections today that I'm sure will prove fruitful and amazing, right? Because, you tend to bring together these amazing human beings, and then we find synergy to keep the conversation going in our own space. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, and allowing any and all of us the opportunity to speak. I know I've certainly had my share, and I certainly appreciate it. And it was wonderful getting to see and meet everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. It was very scary for me initially to do this, because I wasn't sure how it would turn out, but it's been great. It's been great. It's attracted really great people. So thank you. All right. So I guess if there's nothing else, we can end this session. And then I look forward to reconnecting with you outside at the next event and in the community. All right, bye.
Thank you, Alina. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.